Hey y'all, welcome back to Things Come Together, where we talk about the history of soul food and how we take the scraps of our own lives and make magic out of it. Good morning, sunshine. Today I'm feeling good. Like last time we saw each other, I was, like I said, sitting on the struggle bus next to Struggles. And I think I told y'all how I was in a place where I had to make some decisions that I wasn't quite sure about. But fast forward to today, I have moved forward on a few decisions, and some of the stuff that I was dealing with was like legal related. And I just want to remind you all how expensive divorce is. When I first got married, I was like, okay, well, if this don't work out, we just gonna get divorced. Everybody was telling me how simple a divorce was. You don't have any shared assets, you don't have any kids. And I'm here to tell you that even under those circumstances, it is not always just a simple divorce. Our process has been going on for 2 years now, and have racked up a lot of legal fees and things like that. And I had to make a decision on whether or not I was going to move forward with my lawyer. And I was like feeling unsure about moving forward without them. And I just decided, I'm about to cut my costs here, move forward without a lawyer. And I've just been trusting God, to be honest. And so far, everything is working out okay. So looking forward that within a couple more months, this will be settled. But yes, I just want to remind y'all, divorce is very expensive. And I'm almost 10,000 or a little over 10,000 in on this, but I also want to be honest, it's some people that spend way more than that on divorces. So just be very mindful of that. Be sure that if you're going to marry somebody, that it's the person you plan on spending the rest of your life with. Okay. I'm going to leave that at that. But yeah, so today, much better. Made the decisions, still seeing how everything falls out, but also having faith that everything is going to be okay. And for how do we get here? Today's dish is macaroni. If you've been following my social media, you know that I took a vegan cooking class with Taste of Brie, and I definitely want to shout her out. The class was really good. She made everything seem so simple and easy, and she was very personable and created a very comfortable environment. And it was good to be in a shared cooking space too with other people who came for the class. So it was really good. The food was delicious. And so I just tried for the first time to remake the vegan macaroni that we all made together. And it didn't come out too bad. It's not the exact recipe, but it's close. I had to sub a few things out because some of the things that she used I couldn't find at the grocery store. But nonetheless, it turned out fairly well. And if you saw the opening to this video, you know that I did mine as a top macaroni. And I first saw top macaroni on Instagram and I was like, ooh, that looked good. And then I had went to Miami for Art Basel a couple years ago, and I went to this restaurant called House of Mac, and they do top macaronis. So I was like, okay, I definitely want to go to this because I've seen it, but I never had it before. So I went to the restaurant, and the line was out the door. But I really wanted to try the restaurant, so I waited, and when I got inside, I was taking a solo trip, and so I had went to the restroom, and they ended up bringing my food out, but they didn't want it to get cold, so they took it back to the kitchen. So when I came back, they couldn't find my meal no more. And you know how people are when they get hungry. So I'm low-key eyeing the people that work there, somebody better find my food. And one of the lead people at the restaurant ended up coming over and was like, okay, you called me. You definitely giving me that look. And come to find out, he was an Aggie, okay, and he was really cool. We talked for a minute about just how they got started. It was him and his brother, and his brother is the main chef, and he seems to handle more of the operation side. And just was really good to be able to talk to him and hear about their story about how they transitioned from music and got into the restaurant business, and seemed to be very happy there. So I would definitely encourage people if you go to Miami, check out House of Mac. And then Taste of Brie is here in Illinois. It's right outside of Chicago, right outside of the West Side in Cicero, Illinois. So I definitely suggest that y'all check her out too. And she does all kind of things. Like, she's not just vegan, so she cooks with meat as well. And she does meal prep. So y'all definitely check her out. And I made my top macaroni with spinach and salmon. Like I said, it came out really good. And so a little bit about the history of macaroni. So I first started learning about the history of macaroni watching the documentary High on the Hog, which is based off of the book by Jessica B. Harris. And so I definitely want to give her flowers, because she's done a lot of work to look at the connections across the diaspora around the food that existed, and how, like, the Columbian Exchange, which also included the transatlantic slave trade, how it shaped the type of food that we eat in different areas. And a lot of her work reminds me of Jessica Gordon Nimhart, who wrote the book about the Black tradition of co-ops, and then also Barbara Ransby, who wrote the book about Ella Baker, because a lot of these stories are untold stories that we don't know as much about, and also involve a lot of stories about women and how they shaped a lot of our culture that, again, has been hidden. And so I love those three women. Like, in a way, those are like my three sacred texts when it comes to the work that I've done over the years. And so I'm excited. I haven't gotten High on the Hog yet, but I will be getting it, and I'm excited to learn more about soul food from the Black perspective, because a lot of the research that I've been doing is online, and you don't always know like who's putting that out. So I'm excited to get into Jessica's work. On the documentary, I learned about James Hemings, who's responsible for bringing macaroni and cheese to the U.S. So in terms of like the overall history of macaroni and cheese, it is credited with being from the UK, but also Italy. So from what I understand, the first pasta and cheese recipe came from England, but the pastas that we're more familiar with, that elbow macaroni, that recipe came from Italy. James Hemings was a Black man who was enslaved by Thomas Jefferson, and he actually was the half brother of Martha Jefferson, who was Thomas Jefferson's wife. And when Thomas Jefferson went to France, he ended up sending for James Hemings to go, because he wanted him to learn how to make French cuisine. And one of those things that he learned was macaroni and cheese. So he ended up bringing that recipe back to the U.S. And he, like I said, was the first person that cooked macaroni and cheese in the U.S. A lot of his recipes were attributed to Thomas Jefferson and Martha Jefferson, but a lot of the history shows that those recipes actually belong to James Hemings. What made his macaroni so special was that he cooked it in half water and half milk, and so it gave it more of that silkier texture. When it comes to like my family, we make our macaroni and cheese with a roux. A lot of that is because if you look at the history of our family, it's very likely 10 times out of 10 that my maternal family was enslaved by French people. So my great grandmother on my mother's side is from Louisiana, and my great grandfather on my mother's side has a French last name. So my grandmother's maiden last name is French. So that would explain why we make our macaroni with the roux. And so that kind of speaks to like our history, our family history as it relates to macaroni and cheese. And it's interesting too, because a lot of soul food we know is made from the scraps, like whatever people could bring together. And like we talked about last time, enslaved people didn't have ovens when they went back to their shacks. But actually, when I think about it, if you watch the documentary, they talked about how the first macaroni was cooked on an open fire. So it is possible that enslaved people were eating macaroni and cheese during slavery, and this would have been more of like a luxurious or a luxury dish for enslaved people because of the dairy, the cream, the cheese, the butter. So a lot of times we talked about how soul food was made from scraps, and I'm sure they did have to like pull together some of those scraps to make it, but it also would have represented like a more luxury dish. And then also in terms like American history as it relates to macaroni, the first box macaroni was created during the Great Depression. It was 18 cents, and that's what made it so popular, is because you could get this very affordable meal that could feed a number of different people. In my family, we don't eat box macaroni, but I don't judge nobody who do, okay? We all got to get it how we live. And as far as looking at like the comparisons of macaroni across other cuisines in the diaspora, of course, the closest thing that I found was macaroni pie, which is very popular in the Caribbean. And I've seen like the biggest difference between the macaroni that we make and the macaroni in the Caribbean is that it's more stiffer in the Caribbean. And so where we would scoop ours, they usually cut theirs, like they slice it and can like pick it out of the pan with a spatula basically. And the biggest difference in ingredients that I saw was the egg, which kind of makes it stick together more, even though I do see some people here in the US putting egg in their macaroni as well, but that seemed to be like a key ingredient as far as making it stiffer in the Caribbeans. I also saw sour cream, and I don't know if that relates to the consistency as well, but I'm sure it has an impact on the flavor. And then when it came to African cuisine, I had to really think about it because I haven't seen a lot of African cuisines that use dairy. And even when I looked it up, I found like less than a handful of recipes. And the most notable one would have been like this spiced dairy that comes from Ethiopia. I have had Ethiopian food before, and I feel like I spend a lot of time on this podcast saying that I don't like certain things. So I'm not going to talk about Ethiopian food, but I will give respect to Ethiopia because, as people probably know, it's the only African country that was never colonized. And so you got to give respect to them. And then, of course, the legacy of Haile Selassie and his impact on Rastafarianism. Like, it's such rich history that comes out of Ethiopia that has impacted the world. And so I have a lot of respect for Ethiopians, okay? The cuisine is an acquired taste, but, you know, it's also, I'm sure, cuisine that speaks to the history of the country too. So definitely want to say shout out to y'all. And then when I think about foods that I've tasted before, the food that came to mind for me was actually egusi, which is another Nigerian dish. And it has no dairy in it. There's absolutely no dairy in egusi, but they use grounded boiled melon nuts. And so that to me gives it like that cheese-like texture. But again, it's no dairy in the dish. It is very similar to efforiro in that it's cooked with spinach or bitter leaf, depending on where it's made. And then it also has that pepper base. And I didn't see any tomato in any of the recipes that I saw for egusi, but it does have that palm oil, which you will see in a lot of other recipes that also gives it that reddish color. So, you know, for this week, African culture, I'm going to compare it to egusi. And I actually thought egusi might have been like Igbo, but when I looked it up, the internet said that it was Yoruba. Okay, I didn't say that, the internet said that, so take that up with the internet. Don't take it up with me. Okay, I don't want no smoke. As far as the real life comparisons, so I have a few stories that to me remind me of macaroni. So the first one is my very first time trying to make macaroni. I made it, and like I said, like our family makes it with a roux, but if you don't make the roux right and you don't like add the cream right and things like that, it will be loose and like messy basically. And so that's what happened the first time that I made it. Like I didn't do the roux and the cream proportions right, and it was like very runny. And at the time I was in college, and I used to hang out with a lot of people from South Carolina, Charleston to be exact. And one of my friends, Kyle, tried it, and he clowned me so bad. Like, he talked about this macaroni so dang on bad. Like, me and Kyle used to low-key have some epic back and forths. And I just feel like Kyle was, like, bullied in school because the way that he would, like, clown somebody was just, like, did you really have to go there? Like, did you really have to go there? And did you have to stay on that topic so long? Like, did you really? Like, I would have my comebacks, but I still, at the end of the day, like, it would hurt in my heart, some of the things that he would say. And it's funny because I was talking to our friend Trey, who's also from Charleston. Actually, both of them are from Mount Pleasant, but it's right outside of Charleston, so they basically from Charleston. But anyway, was talking to Trey, and every now and then I'll talk to him like about what I'm doing in the food space, and he was like, oh, don't even worry about it. Like, Kyle clowned mine the first time I made macaroni too. So I was like, okay, I didn't feel as bad, but then we both was thinking about it like, we ain't never seen Kyle cook before. Like, I have seen Kyle put food on the grill, but I can't even say that I've seen him season the food that he put on the grill. Now, I'm not saying he didn't, but I'm just saying I didn't see it. So, not you hating from outside the club. Like, this man was really clowning us and ain't made nothing over a stove before. At least nothing that we seen him make. So, that is like very comparable to life, because people will try to clown you about stuff all the time that they have never tried before, ain't gonna try before, but they still will find the energy to like talk about whatever you doing. And at the same time, like, it's interesting because even now, like, me and Trey, we never stopped. Like, we had a bad first start, but we kept getting better at it. And Trey is even like a private chef right now, and one of his like best dishes is his macaroni and cheese. And even with me, like, macaroni and cheese is starting to become one of those dishes that people expect from me, like at the holidays or just if I'm going to something, a special event or anything. And it's because neither one of us stopped. Like, we just kept going, kept perfecting it. Now, I will say, the last macaroni that I took to Christmas or made for Christmas was not that great, but it wasn't my fault, because when I got to my mama and my granny house, they didn't have the right ingredients. So that's why it's always best to cook in, at least for me, to cook in my own kitchen, because they had plant-based butter, which is fine, but it ain't gonna hit the same way in macaroni unless you know that you're using it beforehand, you know how to adjust for it. So plant-based macaroni, or a plant-based butter, then it was, didn't have the right cream. Like, it was a lot going on there. Then my mama had just used the skillet, like the cast iron skillet, to make cornbread, so it still had a little bit of oil on it. So I took my eye off it for 2 seconds, and the dang on skillet was on fire. So by the time the fire went out and working through all the ingredient adjustments, I was just like, you know what, at this point, mix it up and put it in the oven. So it wasn't seasoned quite right. It needed a little bit more salt. But other than that, it was fine. And I've made plenty of macaronis after that again taste great. Like, I actually enjoy putting like a smoked cheese in my macaroni and trying out different cheeses to see like how they taste and the texture and things like that too. So one of them that I definitely always get is like some smoked Gouda, because I love like the taste of a little smokiness in my macaroni and cheese. But yeah, I've been able to get better at it just because I didn't quit. And even now, like, getting into top macaronis and things like that, it's like, you know, I just had to stick at it. Like, I was going to get it eventually. I just had to stick at it and not let Cal get the best of me. And I also want to say shout out to Cal. Like, turned out to be a very fine young man in the sense of like a family man, taking care of his kids, like taking care of his household. So shout out to you, Cal. Like, you know, you have your ways, but you a good person deep down inside and have held me down in a lot of times as well. So I appreciate you. I'm going to give you your kudos. I'm going to talk about you, but I'm going to give you your kudos. I also want to talk about my sexual journey when it comes to macaroni and cheese, because you know what they say, like, you got that macaroni, okay, making that macaroni sound. And this is the portion where I'm going to suggest that family and church folks just skip the next 15 to 20 minutes, okay? This is not for y'all. And, you know, y'all are too holy for this. And also, like, you know, I don't want to hear nobody talking to me about nothing that I talked about during this portion, because I have suggested already that, you know, you fast forward through this point. But yes, I wanted to shout out the sex podcast that I've listened to over time. Y'all have done so much in this space and have made it more comfortable for women, especially Black women, to be more open about sex and what they like during sex and what we like during sex. So I want to say shout out to Angela Yee's Lip Service. I want to say shout out to Horrible Decisions. And I want to say shout out to Poor Minds. Poor Minds is not explicitly a sex podcast, but they do have a segment on there that's about sex. And so I want to say shout out to y'all. I've learned a lot watching those podcasts, and like I said, have just become more comfortable talking about sex openly. I also want to shout out some of my past partners. Like, I've learned a lot about sex from the people that I've been sexually active with. And so, I appreciate y'all for the things that y'all have taught me over time. Like, I definitely put them in my tool bag and, bring them out when I need to. And, lastly, people be hearing me talk about Suki, but that's because I really be feeling her with the stuff that she be saying. And so when she say, she got that good cat, like, I, really connected with that. And also she'll talk about how, she come from a long, long line of women with good cat. And I believe that that's true. Like, it has to be hereditary. Like, one good cat passed down to another good cat. So I want to thank the mothers that came before me that gave me that macaroni. But yes, I also want to take this time to say, if you are triggered by sexual trauma, I will also say this is a portion to fast forward past, because a lot of my story does involve sexual trauma. And for me, it's been a journey of getting past my trauma to pleasure, but I also know that it can be a very sensitive topic. And I have even been triggered by things, seeing things about sexual assault online, sexual trauma online. So I would say definitely fast forward if you feel like, you would be sensitive to this. And I get it. I don't like trigger warnings because I feel like life doesn't give us no trigger warnings, but at the same time, I still respect it and want to offer that to people who need it. But yeah, just to talk about my introduction to sex came very early in life. I had a friend that taught me how to perform oral sex, and this was maybe when I was 4 or 5, and we would take turns doing it on each other. And when our families found out about it, they separated us, and I was taught to never talk about it and really to just bury it. And at the time, this was the early 90s. I actually did have therapy, 2 therapy sessions when I was young, because I had 2 friends that passed away from my school, and the school brought in a therapist that have 1 or 2 sessions with us. And so I had been to therapy before, but in general, in my household, the therapy was not a thing. So the only thing that I was taught was just to never talk about it. And so that's what I did. I buried it. I never talked about it. I mentioned it to one person one time when I was still in elementary school, and they made such a big deal out of it that I never spoke about it again. But I will also say that was not a healthy practice, because as I got older, and people who've been following my social media, when I've had breakdowns, that is one of the things that will come to the surface, that sexual trauma that I had. And because we were separated, there's so many unanswered questions that I have, because it's okay, well, where did you learn this from to even teach it to me? Which always makes me feel like it was secondhand molestation or something that I had experienced, because I would believe that an adult showed this to the person. So for me, it's just, I'm always very sensitive about abuse towards children, because I feel like I have been in some way a part of that as well. And then also the other, my friend was a girl. And so as I got older and I started to learn about how people felt about gay people, it also affected me, because I was okay, well, does this mean that I'm gay? And I had a lot of questions growing up, and it even impacted, I started watching porn at an early age, and I would watch all kinds of different porns, but definitely would watch lesbian porn. And so it affected me. Even today, if people ask me what my sexuality is, I'll tell them I'm queer adjacent. I've never been with a woman past that moment. And I don't think I ever will be. Sometimes I'll be thinking about doing a threesome, but I also feel men have a hard time with the twosome. And I just feel you will just open your relationship up to so many things that I don't have time for, trying to keep two people together in a relationship is hard enough. So I'll just be like, I think about it, but I just feel like it's best to not even go down that route. So I can't say that it hasn't impacted me at all as an adult, but at the same time, like it led me a lot of times to a lot of questions about my own sexuality. But recently I had to realize, like, I did not enjoy eating cat. I really didn't. Did not enjoy it at all. Like, I would do it because it felt good receiving it, so I wanted to keep receiving it, so then I would just do it. But I just remember I really didn't enjoy that. So, I'm sorry to anybody who, might have ever had it in their mind that, I'm not that girl. I'm really not. Like, you might as well just go find somebody else that is going to give you a more pleasurable experience. Not interested. But, so that was like my first sexual experience, and a lot of people would obviously say like that was too young to even be consensual or even be considered sex, and I do agree with that, and at the same time I still consider it my introduction to sex, because that's what it was for me. Beyond that moment, I think like once I was in 8th grade and had like graduated, I had me a little friend or whatever, and we met at the skating rink, and I would always be up at the skating rink like faithfully every weekend and never learned how to skate. So that tells y'all what I was doing there, what my focus was when I was there. But I had my skates, like I had the black skates with I think I may have blue or like pink pom-poms on them or something like that. But either way, like I was there, had my skates looking good, and just never learned how to skate. It was like skating is dangerous. I don't feel like people talk about that enough, because like one bad fall and it's over for you. Like anything could happen. So I tried my best. Like I really did try my best, but I never really got the hang of it. But I would still be at the skating rink every weekend because, my little boo thing was up there. And that's when I started, what I like to call rolling around in the sheets. Like, we would get to maybe like second base. I think maybe that's what they call it, like a little bit of kissing and like manual sex. But other than that, we wasn't doing nothing else, honestly. I feel like I was sexualized very early in high school because I was told that I had DSLs, which any girl with big lips has probably heard that before and been called that before. So that I got very early on. And I would be talking on the phone with a lot of boys, but I was never really that active with any boys, and never was active at all with any boys that I went to high school with. But I did have a little friend when I was 16 years old from a different school that he was my boyfriend. He would come over to my house and try to take me down on my couch. And so embarrassing, just so embarrassing. Come on now, on the couch? Come on now. Why would you do that? And the even more embarrassing part is that my granny used to be at home. So anytime she would come to the top of the stairs, we would then be having to shuffle around and make sure that we looked presentable when she came down, because you can't be doing that when you got your granny in the house. But she would hear us shuffling, and she clearly knew what was happening. So then she talked to my mother and was like, you need to talk to her. You need to have a conversation with her about sex. And, my mother did have a conversation with me. It was very quick. She said, don't do it. That was it. And, although short and brief, it was very effective because I indeed did not do it. I didn't actually have vaginal sex or penetrative sex until I was 24. But when I went to college, I continued rolling around in the sheets, as I would like to call it. And when I got to college, I feel like what I like to call the Southern Boy Special. And I don't know if it was because of Wayne, which I'm sure it did have a big influence from him, but maybe it was just already a Southern thing and this is why Wayne was talking about it. But either way, the few young men that I was involved with while I was in college, they, enjoyed performing oral sex. They really did. That was their jam. And, as I said before, I also enjoyed receiving it. So that's exactly what I did. And I feel bad now, but not really, because I really wasn't doing nothing but starfishing. At the most, I would give them a hand job and we would kiss, and that would be it. I was not returning the favor. And one thing that I will say is like most of the young men that I was with were very respectful, because like I would tell them I was a virgin and they would not take it no further. Like they would relax and chill out and we would keep it at that. And I only was with one person who like was clearly irritated that that's where we were leaving things, but nonetheless, like he still respected it until I told you all about how I had the DUI. And that same night, I didn't want to go home and be alone with my thoughts. So I ended up hitting up this guy who we had been flirting with each other and knew we was interested in each other, but we had never spent like no alone time together. But against my better judgment, I called him just to like go spend the night with him. Like that was it. And he clearly wanted more than that once I got there. And he just did not stop. Like I told him I was a virgin and he still just did not stop. And I remember when it was happening, like basically like leaving my body almost. And I've heard a lot of survivors of sexual assault talk about this, of like how you kind of like leave your body. And for me, like I didn't come back until like right before he was finishing. And so it just was like, I don't know, like I just remember freezing and leaving my body and then eventually coming back. And the next day or a couple of days later, he called me and he was like, he had such a good time and he wanted to spend his birthday with me. And I may be very naive, but I honestly feel like he was not necessarily aware that he had sexually assaulted me. And to be honest, I had no idea either. Like I thought that was my first time having sex, and I thought that it was honestly punishment for all of the rolling around in the sheets that I had done before, because I was really religious at the time. So I was just thinking like, okay, this is just my punishment for those experiences. And it honestly was not until I joined Black, queer, feminist, radical spaces till I understood what enthusiastic consent was. And then I was like, okay, that was not enthusiastic consent, which means that it was sexual assault. And I taught sex ed before, and a lot of the students, like even in the Chicago public school system, a lot of the students that we saw were not Black students. It was a lot of white students and a lot of Latinx students. And so when it comes to things around consent and sexual assault in Black communities, I tend to be a little more lenient around that, because I feel like we're just not having the conversations that we should be having around consent. Like we're not teaching people consent. So I do believe that there are times when people are doing things that they don't know that they're doing. That's my perspective, okay? I've also have heard a lot of women who have experienced sexual assault feel like, no, that is always unacceptable. And honestly, like even death should be a punishment for sexual assault. And I respect everybody's opinions, because what impacts one person, like that's their feeling. I can't speak to that. I can only speak to my perspective. But I know in that moment I was not aware of it, and I believe that it could be very possible that the other person didn't know about it as well. I can't say for sure. Maybe they did. I'm sure they knew something was not right, possibly. But that call that he gave me afterward just made me feel like he didn't understand it either. And I understood that I didn't like the experience, which is why I never saw him again. But I did not understand that it was sexual assault. But that happened when I was 22, and for the next 2 years, I did not date at all. Like I didn't look at a man, I didn't pay no man no attention. Like I just came back to Chicago, was into the church, into my faith, into my work, and that was it. And so then one time I was out canvassing and a Nigerian man found me. I was walking past a Nigerian church and the man found me. And this began the journey of me dating Nigerian men. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. But once we got together, like this was like what I consider my first adult relationship. And so I just felt like it was a natural thing to start having sex in this relationship. And I would say, like, as far as the relationship itself, I feel like for the most part, he was a good partner in the fact that like he was a provider. He took care of everything as far as the housing was concerned. I had a car to drive while I was with him. Like I really didn't have no material needs that wasn't met. Like, I was not a very materialistic person at that time, but at the same time, like, any material thing that I did need, like, he took care of it. He was also a business owner, though. And one thing to know about business owners, like, it can be very up and down sometimes. And so it would be times where, like, I would have to front him on things, but he would always pay me back. But I don't know, something about that relationship, like, it just, after a while, just started to fizzle out. And part of it was because it was my first sexual experience, and it did get to a point where I just wasn't satisfied sexually. But then it also became that stress of, like, dang, like, I'm making money and I'm keep having to hand it over to him. And I was probably just being young at the time, because I, like, just wasn't, it was my first relationship. I didn't understand the concept of, like, okay, yeah, you got to do that sometimes. And it was weighing on me. And then he just did that one last thing that it was like, oh, yeah, like, this is over with. Like, you're done. And that man left the next day to go to church. And before he came back, I was gone, packed up all my stuff, asked my mama to come get me. I was gone. But this was also the time that I knew that I had good cat, because I still was really just starfishing, like, really wasn't doing nothing but starfishing when we was together, because, again, it was my first time. I didn't know what I was doing. And this man still, like, stayed with me and for the most part took care of me. So, you know, this is how I knew. And, like, I will say also about this man, like, we never really talked about marriage. We was only together for 8 months, so it wasn't like he was pressing me for marriage. He wasn't trying to get no green card. Like, he had kids. He had figured out his citizenship thing already. He was just with me because he loved me, I guess, and allowed me to starfish for a very long time. So I would say, like, that was when I knew, like, okay, the cat got to be good. Like, even though I ain't got no moves, like, the cat itself is very good. And then after him, like I said, dated other Nigerians and was in long-term relationships with them. And over time, I would learn, like, other things. Like, certain partners would teach me other things. And I was like, okay, like I said, I'm gonna put that in my bag. And people like to talk, like, again, like I said, about how, like, different partners like different things. But I found that, like, most things about men are transferable. I've had, like, one partner that I did something to, and he was like, he didn't like that. And I respected it. He also did something to me, like, that I did not like either. And we had to pause for a minute and, like, low-key box, because, like, don't play with me. But overall, like, have had positive sexual experiences after that. But because, like, I was starfishing for a long time and had to learn a lot of things from my partners, I do also feel like I became a pleaser very early on, and have had to have a journey of, like, learning that actually sex is for my pleasure as well. And over time have had to learn, like, what I enjoy. So that has been a big journey for me. And I feel like with all of the trauma that I've been through, like, I'm at a point in my life now where it's like, if I'm having sex and I'm not enjoying it, like, I'm going to be vocal about it. I'm going to tell you what I like, what I want, type of thing. Like, I've become a way more dominant person when it comes to sex. And it's been faring me well. Like, I've been having much better sex more recently than I was having before. So that's the good thing about it. I will say, like, when I left my last relationship, I was, like, eager to get back in the field, because we were not sexually compatible, and it only got worse with time. Even though I did send him to a class, shout out to Glamazon Tayomi. I've taken one of her classes before, because she had a riding class, but then she also had a class that was for men. So I definitely sent him right on over to that class, and it got better. But I had checked out of the relationship before we separated from each other. And so it was like, we might as well just cut this out, because I don't want no mixed signals, mixed feelings about what's happening. Like, we about to end this. So, once we ended, I was like, okay, I want to be very particular about how I approach sex moving forward, because it should be for my pleasure. So it's been cool. Like, sexual experiences lately have been very up and down, because, you know, I'm the type of person where I do want something serious, and so I let that be known from the gate, but I can also have casual sex now. And what I've learned is that men do not like women who enjoy having casual sex or can have casual sex with them. A man will want a woman to be in love with everything about him, even if he's not trying to be like that with her. And so I've found men that like are trying to create a facade. And it's just like, you don't got a lot of me. Like, you do not got a lot of me. And I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to let you know. If you're not giving me what I want as far as commitment, that I'm going to be seeing other people. Now, we can decide that we still want to have a sexual relationship with each other, but I'm not going to stop looking for what I want in a relationship. And so that, in a lot of ways, has been the challenge because, like I said, men just want you to be all into them. And it's like, I can't do that if you're not all into me, if you're not meeting the needs that I have for a serious committed relationship. So I have not been having as much sex lately, but that's okay because, you know, when in doubt, self-pleasure is always a thing. So I have gotten better with like using toys and stuff like that, which I used to be very like conservative about, like, oh, like I don't want no parts of that. But now, yes, I will pop me out a toy. I still don't do it that often just because I don't know, I'm just not in the mood maybe for it, or like I'm still wanting more of like a human connection, so I don't do it as much. But when I do have a great time, I enjoy like the sexual and orgasmic healing that comes along with it. So, yeah, that's my sexual journey as of lately, or altogether over time, but definitely as of lately. Very interesting. I'm excited for the next person that comes and shows that he's worthy of that experience. You know, I don't be having no complaints when it comes to how I am in the bedroom. Like I said, I have had one person that I did something to that was like, I don't like that. But other than that, they love me. They really do. God bless them. Each and every one of them. For Don't Be Rude, I just want to say shout out to Carisha because she really brought it back for pop culture, because it's been very dry as of lately. Like, it really has. And, you know, for a minute, I thought I was going to have to talk about politics. And I'm so glad that she released a new episode of Carisha Please, because I really did not want to talk about politics. I did not want to talk about this national election. I'm going to vote. I feel like nobody would like the perspective that I have on this election. It doesn't matter what candidate you're for. You're probably not going to like my perspective, so I just prefer not to talk about it altogether. But up until 2 days ago, that was the most entertaining thing going on in this country. And it's so sad because the rest of the world is looking at us like, what is going on over there? Yeah, I'm going to leave that at that for now. But yes, the world is definitely trying to figure out like what is going on in the U.S. And I, too, as someone who lives here, begrudgingly, am also trying to figure out what's going on. So I'm going to leave that for where it is right now and get back to Carisha. And I just want to say that I'm so happy to see her come back outside, to be back to her podcast, back to everything that she's working on right now. Like, I really like Carisha. I really do. And I respect, like, what she's done for the group so much, because it's like, when JT was in prison, Carisha was still keeping the group's name alive. Like, it never was Carisha. It was always City Girls, City Girls, City Girls. And even when she was pregnant, like, we all know that journey. Like, she was pregnant, still outside doing what she needed to do to keep the group name alive. And even when she's had, like, done some more, like, solo verses and the podcast and Carisha Please or Carisha Roulette, like, she always said, like, I'm not going solo, like, we not going solo, like, we a group, we gonna stay a group. Like, she has said that from the beginning. And just watching their interviews, like, I've heard her say that multiple times. And so for me, I just always respected how she moved in the group. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I have actually enjoyed the music that JT is making, but I can't really listen to it in respect because I don't like the way that she's moving. And, you know, you cannot, like, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, so I can only say what I'm seeing. Who knows, like, what the back end is really going on there. But I will say, like, once JT got her run, it was just like, okay, I'm going solo right now. And I really don't like that. I really don't. Like, even when you look at, like, I'm sure people have seen that video of that time where the City Girls was performing and JT fell, and how Carisha came back over there and, like, picked her up and was like, you know, you good, keep going. And I feel like that just speaks to Carisha's character. Like, she could have did the Beyonce and Kelly on her and kept singing, but she didn't. Like, she stopped, picked her up, and was like still rapping, like making sure that they kept it going. And so I feel like that really spoke to her character, and that's how she's moved since we've seen her move. So for that, I feel like I just really I haven't liked the optics of what's going on. And so I respect the music and the artistry that JT has been coming with, but I haven't really gotten into it like that, just to be honest. So it was good to hear Young Miami come and speak about her perspective on everything that's been going on. And when she told Saucy that she got left off Bad and Bougie, like, you too much, like, you too much. But she was being honest, like, what y'all want me to say? I didn't know nothing about the song. I got left off of it. And I did see one perspective of when they said JT was on Carisha Please, which I did watch that episode as well. But they were talking about how JT was upset when she was in prison. Young Miami had did a solo song, but she still put the City Girls on there. But she was upset because she didn't know nothing about it. And I can respect that. And at the same time, like, my girl was in prison. Come on now. That's different from being outside and not getting the information about it. And people talked about how they signed NDAs and things like that. Okay, I get it. Respect. And at the same time, y'all a group. Like, Young Miami was even talking about how JT was working on her album and she didn't know nothing about it. So I just feel like I just haven't been liking that. I really haven't been liking it. And even when Young Miami started talking about Diddy, now that was the part I was like, dang, like, you was with him at his highest, but when he got to his lowest, like, you didn't really hold it down for him. And in my heart, I feel like, okay, that's not right. But then, like, one of the memes that I posted recently, like, a man will leave you in the desert without water. So at some time, like, you do have to cut your losses with them, honestly. And I have to respect how she moved with it. Like, you know what? This ain't good for business no more. I got to be out. And I feel like if you with a man and things go sour and y'all really locked in together, like, you should stay with them. But if you see that they not being loyal, which we seen with Diddy over and over again, and the embarrassment that he caused her for all of the other people that he was with and the baby that he had while they was together, like, you did the right thing. You know, Miami, you did the right thing, and I respect it. So yeah, I enjoyed the interview altogether. I really appreciate the way Saucy handled the interview, and also how he's been supporting her over this time, because she right, when you're going through something like that, you really do need a strong support person or support team around you to remind you that there's a moment after this. Like, this too shall pass. And it seems like Saucy has been that person for her. And she even talked about how a lot of the people that she thought would be around during that time for her, have not been around, and even used it as an opportunity to laugh at her about it. And I have had those experiences as well. So I understand her perspective on that as well. And I'm so happy to see her come back, get outside, and get back to it. And I'm excited to hear more music from her as well, because Can't F With Me, that was a good song, but because of everything that she was going through, she couldn't really promote it the way that she should have been able to promote it. And a hit is a hit. You can't take that away from her. That was a good song, but she wasn't outside, so it didn't perform as well. So I'm excited to hear what she has coming forward. I'm excited to see everything else, the game, the podcast, more merch. I'm here. I'm supporting you. I'm rooting for you. You got this. And for Greatest Place on Earth, I also just want to keep that momentum going and give my support and affirmations to anybody that had to take a moment, regroup, reassess the situation, and find the strength to get back out there. It is not easy at all. I have been going through that same situation. I stopped working at my last job almost a year ago now, just short of a year ago. And it wasn't until 5 months ago that I started to become vocal about the fact that I wasn't there anymore. But the first 6 months, like, I was at home, like, getting myself together, honestly, and figuring out what my next steps were going to be. And it's been a rocky process. Like, it hasn't been easy, but I still made it through. And so I'm always here to affirm anybody that's going through anything like that, that needs that extra push or that extra motivation. Like, you gonna be just fine. We all gonna be just fine. We gonna make it. The only thing is we just got to keep going. So I'm sending that good energy. I know that we gonna keep going. We gonna make it happen. We gonna see things greater than we thought we would see. So just remember, like, things come together. They really do. And I just want to say thank y'all for sticking with me on this journey. Thank you for watching me grow and sticking with me. And I'm excited to, like, continue to get deeper into this. I definitely wanted to pace myself because I would rather start slow and speed up than to start strong and fade out. So I'm excited to, like, pick up the pace a little bit and get with it and bring, like, more content. So thank y'all for sticking with me, and I'll see y'all on the next time. See y'all. We don't even call these men our men. These be our friends. Never give your all to a man.